This kind of title for this whole time of worship is called Come to Bethlehem. When I was thinking about Bethlehem, I went back to when I was a child. I actually visited Bethlehem. There's a place there called the Church of the Nativity. It's a church that was built over a cave that, according to tradition, is the exact spot where Jesus Christ was born. And I remember that walking through this doorway in the church that takes you into that actual cave. And as you walk into that cave, you'll see this star that's sitting there where they claim is the exact spot where he was born. And that star has this inscription in Latin. It says, "Here Jesus Christ was born of the Virgin Mary." And as a young boy standing in that cave, thinking about the significance of what happened there, me and the people that were with me, we began to sing Silent Night. What was really cool as we sang Silent Night, there was a group from Germany that began to sing along with us in German. And here we are in this cave where potentially could have been where Jesus was born, singing Silent Night together. When I think back to that moment, man, it was a great reminder that the city of Bethlehem is so much more than just the setting for all the Christmas plays that we have every year. This is a very place where God is going to change the course of history, because it's in Bethlehem where God would send the Savior of the world, the Messiah, to be born. How do we know that? We go back into prophecy, and there's a prophecy in Micah chapter 5, verses 2, that tells us that Bethlehem would be the place where God is going to send the Messiah, the Savior of the world. Now, if you go to Micah chapter 5, you're not going to see that right away, because in verse 1, it talks about how Israel's facing a threat from a foreign power. Nothing very unique to Israel, because they're always facing, foreign threats. But here they are facing this threat. In the midst of this threat, they go from verse 1 to verse 2, and this is what it says, because it's talking about this future day when a Messiah, a ruler, would come over the nation of Israel. And this is what we read. "But you, O Bethlehem Ephrathah, who are too little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler of Israel, whose coming forth is from of old, from ancient of days." It's a great prophecy because there's so much in there, but just for the time that we have this morning, I want to give you two details about what this prophecy has to say about this coming Messiah. And the first thing that we're told is the birthplace. We are told that when the Messiah comes, they will be born in Bethlehem Ephrathah. Now, Bethlehem has quite a history in the Bible, especially in the Old Testament. We know it's in a very extremely old city, and it was originally called Ephrathah, which means fruitfulness. It's mentioned a number of times throughout the Old Testament, but the very first place we find Bethlehem mentioned is in Genesis chapter 35. We're told it was the closest place where Jacob, who's a patriarch of the Jewish faith, where he buried his wife Rachel. We also read in Ruth chapter 1 that this was the very city where Ruth's mother-in-law Naomi and her family, that's where they were at. Then they left Bethlehem because of a famine and went to go live in Moab. But probably what most of us think about when it comes to the town of Bethlehem from the Old Testament perspective, this was King David's hometown. In fact, in 1 Samuel chapter 17, we read that David's father Jesse was from this town, and it was around this town, in the hills of this town, that David would go take care of his father's sheep. But despite its connection with King David, this is a very insignificant city. In fact, at the time of this prophecy, Bethlehem had a population of about a few hundred people. It was about 5 miles from Jerusalem, which means it lived within the shadow of the great city of Jerusalem. So people wouldn't go to Bethlehem as a destination stop. They would travel through Bethlehem to get to Jerusalem. And that's why we read in this prophecy, what does it say? It's too little to be among the clans of Judah, which means this is not one of the prominent cities in that area. Just imagine today if I were to put up a map of the state of Pennsylvania. What we would see on there is Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, right? You would not see listed on that map Hermitage and Sharon, all right? As much as we love our cities around here, right? Because we're not considered to be a prominent city here in the state of Pennsylvania. And that's the same thing about Bethlehem, an insignificant city that if you would have a map of Judah at that time, it would not be listed on that map. But although it was an insignificant city, this is the city that God chose to be the birthplace of the Messiah, the one anointed by God to come and to deliver the people of Israel. I think it's a powerful thing that God would choose Bethlehem, because what does it show us about God's character? That He will choose things that are insignificant to make a lasting impact. This city is a reminder that God, through something small and insignificant, can change the course of history and eternity. And we know the focal point of this passage is about Jesus Christ, but does not reflect our own lives. How many of you here feel insignificant? You feel that you're of no value. And we see that if God can use a small town to bring His very Son to save the world, how can He not use you to go out there and make a difference? But besides the detail of the birthplace of the Messiah, here's the second one. it says that this Messiah, when he comes, his origins will be from old, from Ancient of Days. So I was studying this passage, thinking about how to explain that phrase. I went back to our time where we studied the book of Daniel. If you remember in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 9, Daniel has a vision of God. Now, as his vision of God, how is God referred to? Who is he referred to as? He is referred to as the Ancient of Days. It was a title given to God to show that God existed before time even began. That means God is outside of time and space. He's the one who created it. And so by using this phrase in this prophecy, from of old, from ancient days, it describes the origin of the Messiah. Not that he's going to be an old man when he comes. Not that his ancestry is a long ancestry, but more than that, it's describing that when this Messiah comes, he will be a divine figure. He'll be one who existed from the beginning of time. One source I read explained it this way, that this Messiah, his origins has been from eternity. His existence rooted outside of time, space, and matter. So I want to stop right here. What does Micah 5:2 tell us about this coming Messiah? That first of all, he will be born in Bethlehem. But secondly, his origin is from eternity. Now, if you think about that prophecy, who do you know of that fulfilled that? I'm sure you know where this is going to take us, right? Because when I look at this throughout the human history, there's only one person that can satisfy this passage fully, and his name is Jesus Christ. You see, 700 years after this prophecy, Jesus came to this earth, and guess where he was born? In Bethlehem. In fact, what's quite unique, and you guys know the story very well, the fact that he was born in Bethlehem was a divine act of God himself. You see, Joseph lived in Nazareth, not even, close to Bethlehem, but because of a census by the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus, Joseph has to take his wife Mary, who was at that time pregnant, to go register in Bethlehem. And it was there when she gave birth. As we read in Luke chapter 2, verse 6, it says the following, "And while they were there in Bethlehem, the time came for her to give birth." And the fact that Jesus was born in Bethlehem is also echoed in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. This is what Matthew says. "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem." So we see that Jesus satisfied the first part of this prophecy. He was born in Bethlehem. Now maybe you're here today and you're saying, okay, I understand what you're saying, but wasn't this prophecy made up by Christians many years later? It's like the Christians forced this, right? They said that this prophecy was about Jesus after Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Well, let me tell you, that's not the case. If you go back and read the rest of Matthew chapter 2, you'll remember, what do the wise men do when they first came? They go to the King Herod. They say, "Herod, we are here to worship the King of the Jews. We have seen his star in the sky. We've come here to worship him." And of course, King Herod was not too happy about that because he was an evil, wicked man and didn't want any threat to his throne. So he figured, okay, I'm going to find out what this king is. So what does he do? He goes and asks the Jewish religious authorities, "Please tell me where the King of the Jews is to be born." And all of them said, "He is to be born in Bethlehem," as they quote Micah chapter 5, verse 2. Not something that the Christians made up, but something that the Jewish authorities themselves knew the truth of what this prophecy spoke about. But it wasn't just the fact that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. We also know that according to the New Testament, Jesus had his origins from eternity. I could spend a long time talking about that, but I'll simply quote what the Apostle Paul has to say about the nature of Jesus Christ. This is in the first chapter of Colossians, verses 15 and 17. It says, "Christ is the visible image of the invisible God. He existed before anything was created and is supreme over all creation. He existed before anything else and holds all creation together." What is Paul trying to say? He said when Jesus Christ came, he wasn't just some human. He is God in flesh. He is the one who was here before the very creation of this world. And everything that is created that we see with our very eyes has its origins in Jesus Christ and him alone. It's a powerful depiction of Christ. And we see here that as this prophecy says that the Messiah will be born in Bethlehem and his origins are from eternity, we see this fulfilled in the person of Jesus Christ. But Jesus, when he was here on earth, he actually claimed to be the Messiah. Many of you may not remember the conversation he had, but he meets a woman at the well in Samaria. They had different views about how to worship. And so in John chapter 4, she says a statement, and I want you to hear how Jesus replies. It says this, "The woman said to him, 'I know that the Messiah is coming. He who is called Christ, the Anointed One. When he comes, he will tell us all things.' Jesus said to her, 'I who speak to you am he. In other words, Jesus is saying, you're looking at the very Messiah, the very one that the prophet Micah foretold, I have come to fulfill that. Now, you might think that's a powerful statement, right, that Jesus is claiming to be Messiah. But really, from history's perspective, it's nothing unique. There's many people who have claimed to be the Messiah. In fact, at the time of Jesus, there were two men, Simon of Perea and Simon Bar Kokhba, who claimed they were the Messiah. The times that we live in today, there are many people who claim to be the Messiah. There's a man who lives in Brazil. He dresses like Jesus and rides around on a scooter claiming to be the Messiah. There's a guy who's known as Jesus of Serbia who walks around and people flock to come hear him teach because he claims to be the Messiah. And there's a guy from the Philippines who has, amassed over 6 million followers worldwide where he claims to be the Messiah. And even Jesus indicated in Matthew chapter 24 that there would be many that would rise up claiming to be the Messiah to what? To deceive people. So what separates Jesus? What makes him unique about his claim to be the Messiah? And of everyone throughout history, let me just tell you this. He not only fulfilled the messianic prophecy in Micah 5:2, but he has fulfilled over 300 messianic prophecies. That may not mean anything to you, but to a mathematician by the name of Peter Stoner, he wanted to know, what does that mean in probability causes? So he calculated the odds that just 8 of those prophecies be fulfilled in one person. And guess what he came up with? 1 in 10 to the 17th power. Now, I am not good at math at all. Ask my kids, because when it comes to like 3rd or 4th grade math, they go to their mother, not me. So I wanted to know, how in the world do I understand that significant of a number? So here's how the probability would be. There is more of a probability for you to be hit by lightning, to win the lottery and become a professional athlete in your life than for 8 of those prophecies to be fulfilled by one person. That's the power of what we find. That means the probability that 8 of these being fulfilled in one person are beyond what we can ever imagine. And here we have Jesus Christ, that 300 of them were fulfilled by him. So when I think of Jesus being born in Bethlehem, it is not just a reminder of a fulfilled prophecy. It is God's divine confirmation of what the Christmas story is about. A story that the Messiah, the Savior of the world, has come. And I pray that you come back on Christmas Eve. Because while we're talking about Bethlehem being a fulfilled prophecy, on Christmas Eve we're going to see it's more than that. It is a fulfilled promise. But I want to close with this challenging thought for all of us. We're living in a time when the true meaning of Christmas is becoming insignificant and forgotten. And so our call, in light of what we've seen today, when we think about Bethlehem and the significance of what happened that first Christmas night, is to go out and share that truth. Because on that night, in a little town called Bethlehem, not only was a baby born, but listen, the very one who would be the Savior of the world. I think of the words that the angel declared to the shepherds in Luke chapter 2. And they are words that should remind all of us of why we celebrate Christmas and why Bethlehem is such a special place, a city where God changed the course of history. Because this is what the angel said, "Fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy that will be for all the people. For unto you is born this day in Bethlehem, the city of David, a Savior who is Christ." That means the Messiah, the Lord. And my question for all of you is twofold. Are you willing to go out and share with people what Christmas is about? And secondly, do you know the Messiah? Do you know Jesus Christ? I pray you do, because there's no greater gift that God has given us than his very Son.